Hi. How's everybody doing?
Good. Very good.
Good. Hi, John. Hi, Andrew. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Lindsay, and you are here with us for a Trees for the Future live stream. Today, the topic is agriculture and climate crossroads. So, in honor of Climate Week, we're talking about really digging into the connection between climate change, man-made climate change, and really how the food systems and agriculture tie into that. And so I'm joined today by hopefully two colleagues. We're waiting on Carol to join, but I'm joined by Andrew and then Carol, who's in Kenya, and I think just having some technical difficulties, but we should see her here soon. And then we're joined by Jean, a partner of ours at Trees for the Future with Fagrib. So before we get started, I just wanted to give everybody a quick heads up of how things are going to go. We're going to all be chatting together here about the topic of climate and food systems. In the meantime, while you're joining us either from YouTube or from Facebook, please drop your name in the comments. Let us know where you're joining us from, and let us know a little bit about yourselves. We'd love to hear from you. We have supporters on these live streams. We get ambassadors. I see Pam is already on. We have a lot of our staff that join us from these live streams as well. So it's really exciting to be able to build that community with you all here on these monthly live streams. So thank you again for being here with us. Like I said, my name's Lindsay. I'm on the marketing team here at Trees for the Future. And I work closely with, I'm happy to be able to work so closely with so many of our staff across sub-Saharan Africa to really tell the stories of the farmers that we serve and explain the work that we do in sustainable agriculture. I'd love for the three of our participants to introduce themselves, but I'm going to give Carol just 30 more seconds to join us so that she has a chance to introduce herself as well. So in the meantime, just digging into the issue of climate change, over the next 20 years, global temperature is expected to reach or exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming. And with that will come dramatic changes to our planet. And a lot of that is what we're going to discuss today and the solutions to it. But that includes extreme heat, floods, drought, the loss of plant and animal species around the globe. For humans, the most vulnerable among us are the most affected. And that's especially for those of us who are, located near the equatorial band. So we've invited all of you here today to discuss the challenges and share the solutions that we see working firsthand at Trees for the Future. And on that note, I'll give Andrew the floor and let him introduce himself. And like I said, when Carol hops in, we'll just welcome her with open arms. So Andrew, tell us a little bit about yourself and your work with Trees for the Future.
Thank you, Lindsay, and thanks everyone for tuning in. My name is Andrew Zacharias. I'm the Director of Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning at Trees for the Future. I started at Trees for the Future 11 years ago as a Peace Corps volunteer in Tanzania, organizing tree planting groups, reforestation activities, and agroforestry groups. Since then, I've become the Director of Monitoring and Evaluation. I manage all of our data collection systems, all of our impact measurements, our drone program, and connecting our work with the world together with Lindsay and Kendall. Really happy to be here to talk about this very important subject.
Yes, we love having you here. And Andrew is one of the big main people behind the before and after drone shots that you all love so much. So, and then Jean, please tell us a little bit about your background and what you do with Fagrib and how you're connected to Trees for the Future.
Yeah, my background is I'm a son of farmer. When I grew up, my father passed away when I was 11. And then that's how I fell in love with agriculture when I followed my mom to the farm to grow food for, just for living and for selling, extra. That's how I grew up and loving agriculture, practicing agriculture. Then I went to the University of Agriculture. And then so I was graduated in 1998 as an agricultural engineer, specialized in crop production and farming systems. Then from there, I have my first company called JAADIC, called JADIC. The JADIC is still there and doing fine. I have more than 100, 100 employees in Cameroon. And then they are all agriculturalists, they are all agronomists, and what they do is they grow and supply food as a cooperative and we sell to the markets. We supply restaurants, hotels, and other retailers, and they receive their money monthly. They are paid monthly, not just when they're supplying food, but when they supply food, they register and they are paid monthly. It is a very, very successful experience.
Mm-hmm.
Now, moving forward in 2022, I started exporting coffee from Cameroon to Atlanta, and very, very organic, 100 organic coffee. So by doing that, I was able to connect to other projects like water hygiene and sanitation. I managed some funding from Canada and from Italy for 3 years before moving to the US in 2028. And then after that, I got registered at the university, Strayer University, where I graduated with MBA. And as an honor roll student, all my teachers forced me to continue to keep going to the PhD, but I chose to do the DBA, Doctor of Business Administration. So this is my career. And then by doing that in 2011, I started doing consultancy internationally, working in Haiti, Dominican Republic, in Africa, several countries. And then after that, I realized that there was a missing piece. That I was not able to really give my all potential to the ground. That's why
Mm-hmm.
I created Forgrave in 2015, and then hired some folks with who I have been working with so far. And then in 2019, I was connected to trees. Why? Because one of my associates, my advisor, John Lewis, realized that we have some common ground in terms of objectives, and say, hey, Gene, I need you to work with trees because they are even present in Cameroon. They are planting trees, and you're doing cocoa. You're doing cocoa without
Mm-hmm.
deforestation. You're doing sustainable cocoa. Why not you guys join your effort and work together? That's how I get connected to the very, very high level company Trees for the Future that I'm very proud of. And then we started the journey by just sustaining cocoa farmers with planting trees and developing forest garden. And then
Mm-hmm.
after a year, we realized that we need to extend. We extended the project, and then extended to the chart. And
Yeah.
then when we reach chart, we develop another concept adapted to the Sahel. And then the concept was also designed to solve the problem that the Greek Green Wall is facing, because the Greek
Mm-hmm.
Green Wall is a wonderful initiative, but on the ground there were zero impact. That's why we came up with some approach that will be a piece of solution of what they are facing as a challenge. And that's
Mm-hmm.
how we connected to the Great Green Wall headquarters in Addis Ababa. And then after that, they refer us to the Great Green Wall agency in Chad. Together, we worked, last year, and then just came up with a very, very high level result. That is high percentage of result that we never have before. That is almost 98% of the success.
And we
It is,
have, and Jean, we have some pictures of some of the nurseries in Chad that we're going to show here in a little bit.
yeah,
And so I don't want you to give it all away
yeah.
because
So
we're definitely going to show some more of that soon.
absolutely.
But
So
thank you
with
so much. Thank you so much for telling us about your backgrounds. I didn't realize your full journey to where you are now. So, I mean, the fact that you have all of this insight into agriculture and business and agribusiness and how it all comes together is a really powerful mix of skills and knowledge. And we're really happy to be able to work with you and be able to support your work and do the great things that we're doing with Bagrib in Cameroon and Chad and hopefully beyond. And now, as promised, Carol, the one we've all been waiting for. Carol, how are you? Oh no, she froze. Carol, how's it going? So I think you might be on mute. Yeah, okay. So she'll figure out her technical difficulties. We'll try to get her in here eventually. But Carol is on our training team in Kenya, and she works very closely with farmers in our program. to train them in the forest garden approach, which is the sustainable agriculture methodology that we use here at Trees for the Future to help farmers repair their land and really reverse land degradation. And on that note, help mitigate the effects of climate change, which is, really a big topic for today. So those are our experts that we're speaking with today. And another really expert voice that we'll be referencing throughout the conversation today is the IPCC. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew who that was. It's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, also known as IPCC. And this is a working body formed by the United Nations. And this is really, as expert as it gets. These reports pull from thousands of experts around the globe, and they're really dedicated to understanding climate change and the actions needed to address it. And so when we reference stats today over the next 40 minutes, that is where those stats are pulling. You can share the link to the IPCC in the comments as well, so you can learn and do your own research as well. But that's where these statistics are coming from, and really how we're able to build the discussion around what needs to be done and why. So without further ado, I just want to remind everybody to drop their questions in the comments. And now that we have 2.5 of our participants here, we'll get started. So I wanted to talk first about what we know about climate change. So what's happening? What is there that we need to know? Greenhouse gas emissions from human activities are responsible for approximately 1.1 degrees Celsius of warming. That's since 1850 to 1900 or so. Greenhouse gases include carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and methane, along with others, but those are the three big ones, especially when we're talking about agriculture in relation to greenhouse gases. Averaged over the next 20 years, global temperature is expected to reach or exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming, and a lot of you have probably heard that number before. Unless there are immediate, rapid, and large-scale reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, limiting warming to close to 1.5 degrees Celsius or even 2 degrees Celsius will be beyond reach. So this is really, really important information to receive and to listen to. We are at a turning point here on our planet to make really, really impactful change right now. And not to, sound very negative, but before it's too late, right? So why do we need to avoid 1.5 to 2 degrees of warming? Extreme temperatures are something that I think we can all quickly understand when we hear, global warming and climate change and rising temperatures. But at 2 degrees Celsius of global warming, heat extremes would more often reach critical tolerance thresholds for agriculture and health, meaning it's too hot to grow the food that we need, and it's too hot to live in the places that many of us live in today. Intensifies the water cycle as well and rainfall patterns. That means more floods, more droughts, more mudslides, sea level rise. There's that extreme sea level events that we currently refer to as 100-year events that could be happening every year by the end of this century. And then for those of us that live in cities, all of these things are amplified, right? It's hotter, rainfall events cause more flooding. So really all of us are impacted. And this is something that every single one of us is impacted by and has the opportunity to address. And that's why we're here today to discuss what are the leading causes behind these challenges that we're facing, and how can we fix them? How can we address them and really avoid these stark warnings, right? So when we talk about these stark warnings, extreme temperatures, sea level rise, intensifying water cycle, that's an illustration of what's to come, but it's also something that we're already facing. And hopefully we can get Carol back on and she can tell us a little bit about what farmers are currently facing now in our program. But Andrew, I'll ask you to chime in here just based on your visits with farmers that we work with. Based on your experience with, drone monitoring and what you see with farmers when you visit the field, what are the challenging conditions that farmers are already facing as it relates to climate change and unexpected or irregular weather patterns?
Geez, Lindsay, that's a bleak introduction. Very
I
heavy.
know, right? I had my notes earlier and I was like, how can I make this happier? But we got to talk about it, right?
You shouldn't, and it needs to be recognized. Yeah, and talked very bluntly because it's a very real problem for everyone on this call, everyone in the West, everyone in developing nations. Everybody's going to feel the effects of this, and in many, many very real ways, people already are, and it is affecting the lives of many hundreds of thousands of millions of people just in a detrimental way. We work with people in equatorial sub-Saharan Africa who are on the front lines of climate change, who are already experiencing the negative effects of it. Um, Even before climate change, this was an area of the world that lived very much hand to mouth, growing food in the fields and consuming it at home. And if for whatever reason, pestilence, drought, acts of God, they were unable to harvest food that year, it was a very serious situation for themselves and their families. And this is something that's compounded with the effects of climate change. You mentioned more dramatic rainfall events, longer periods of dry weather, and shorter, more severe periods of rainfall are not conducive to traditional agriculture, not conducive to a healthy diet at home. And this is something that we are seeing.
Yeah. And Jean, you gave us a little sneak peek at this next question, but let's look at Chad and the work that we're doing there together with, as Trees for the Future and FAGRIB. What are the conditions like for farmers in a country like Chad, where it's very hot and very dry throughout the year?
Yeah, the challenge is real. And then the challenge is real. But when we take chart from the north to the south, the conditions are not the same. The vulnerability are not the same. And what we do is we came up with an bottom up approach. That is, we start to see what are the root causes of vulnerability in terms of climate change, because the threat is real. People are suffering really in Chad, and with the very very the drought, and then the flood sometimes. So when they're waiting for rainfall, it just come, and then for a few days the flood is everywhere, the water flood everywhere, and then some crop are will emerge when they needed just a little water. And then sometimes it goes very fast, then the water stops very quickly, and then there is no water anymore. But what we try to realize is to see how there are in some area that we have more trees, like in the southern area, that where people are not limiting cutting trees, and they started adopting planting more trees. They realized that it is creating a micro environment that allow plants to resist. And then the sustainable management of the soil, that is, you know, applying our model of reduced tilling, and then our model of incorporating manure to the soil, allow the soil to resist, allow the plant to resist to the drought. So progressively, we are trying to work on the adaptation, because the effect, the immediate, effect is real, but adaptation is the key in the southern of Chad. But in the northern of Chad, the issue is just okay to it's like a damage control, because the drought is so hard. And what we do is we came up with the trees for the future, not only encouraging them to stay in the farm the whole year, to stay in their little farm in the whole year, because there is water. They have water accessibility. That water allows them to grow a little garden. But when their garden is exposed to the soil, to the direct sun, it suffer. So they realize that okay, now to adapt their product to the climate, they need to plant more trees in the area that we try to grow food, like in the
Mm-hmm.
oasis. So the oasis is just like a piece of land that allowed them to have hope in life, because the conditions are very, very rude in the Sahel and in the desert. But the oasis is where when we have the source of water, the well, from that well, they have water to feed the animal, to feed themselves, to water the trees and water the garden, which is like a hope of life. And then they even use the same water to do the blocks to build their houses. So
Mm-hmm.
progressively, they realize that when they have more trees, they have more, they have the micro environment that allow them to have more food and to,
Mm-hmm.
you know, things like that, and the whole year, not just in the rainy season. That is a
Yeah.
piece of effort that we did to mitigate and to adapt in the climate. If not, it is just what we, you guys know, the drought is real and it's the effect is so bad. But
Mm-hmm.
the hope is high because they realize that, okay, Trees for the Future and Fabric came at the Great Grey War zone when they lost hope completely with the Great Grey Zone, with the Great Grey War, because there was no impact. The little thing that the Great Grey War did before, it disappeared. But when we came, we revitalized and then we relaunched activity and things are going on, even though they need more from us.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, it is just what we're trying to do, trying to encourage adaptation, and then encourage, you know, and then try to mitigate by planting trees. We mitigate the climate, the effect of the climate. That's it.
Absolutely. And we will talk more about mitigation as well, because a lot of what we're talking about, well, everything we're talking about today is so interconnected, right? It's almost like where do we start, because all of these things are built on one another. And as a farmer has trouble, sowing and harvesting a crop because of climate, and what steps do they take to avoid the effects of climate change, and then how does that contribute to climate change? So it's all of these things that build on each other, right? And in light of Carol not being with us, Peter, a Kenyan staff member, commented to share that in Kenya they're seeing unprecedented rain patterns, and farmers become disoriented and are not sure when to plant. What's presumed is the long rains, where the rainy season becomes short and we find production going very low. So a lot of what you were speaking to as well, Jean. So, as we feel this pressing threat of climate change, and we're looking for answers, it's easy to get really down and really anxious, right? As Andrew pointed out, my introduction was pretty heavy. But at Trees for the Future, we address the root causes of these problems, because those Band-Aid solutions that we're sometimes grasping for will only take us so far. It's abundantly clear that our food systems are a leading cause of greenhouse gas emissions and of climate change. And so when we talk about the climate change mitigation that farmers can put into place, and the solution that they can be a part of in climate change, I want to step back for a second and talk about how land use and our food systems have really contributed to the problem up to this point. And that's not to say it's any one person's problem or one person's fault, but that we have so many people on this planet and so many people that we're trying to feed, that the practices that we've been using just aren't sustainable. About half of the world's habitable land is used for agriculture, and industrialized farming practices involve these methods like clear cutting and burning huge swaths of land to grow crops for human and livestock consumption. So year after year, crops are grown and harvested from the same stretch of land, leaching it of all of its nutrients and biodiversity and degrading the soil. As Jean mentioned, as we use this soil, it becomes harder to grow things, to grow the food that we're relying on. And then when this land is degraded, it also loses its ability to capture and store greenhouse gases. So when we're talking in the beginning about what our goals are to reduce carbon emissions, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we're also losing our ability to capture carbon and these other greenhouse gases in the land, because our soil is going away. Studies show, experts agree, that practices such as wood and crop harvesting increase global net land use emissions and explain about half of the cumulative loss in biomass on our planet. So human agriculture is dramatically and unequivocally tied to these problems that we're seeing. We know that human agriculture has resulted in 116 gigatons of soil carbon lost over time. And so that's massive, right? How much carbon has been displaced by us using the land that we need to use, right? And so we're here today to ask Andrew and John how we can use the land better so that we don't have to have this negative impact on the land. And Andrew, as we spoke about in the beginning, you are the mastermind behind our drone surveys. And that statistic I just mentioned is as far as land use emissions being caused by by agriculture, and agriculture being the cause of half of the cumulative loss in biomass on our planet. Can you explain for everybody what biomass is, specifically above ground biomass, and what purpose that serves on a farm, in particular in places like sub-Saharan Africa where conditions are so challenging?
Sure, absolutely. So very basically, biomass above or below ground is just plant life. Whether that plant life is there all year, perennial, or if it is grown and harvested annually, like an annual. Above ground biomass is really easy to measure because we can see it above ground and we can measure it physically. It gets a little bit more tricky below ground. There's a lot of scholarly research and calculations you can do to estimate. But we at Trees of the Future, we use our drones to estimate the amount of above ground biomass growth on our forest garden systems from year to year. This is very important that we see dramatic increases in such a short period of time from practitioners who are learning the forest garden approach and implementing it on their fields, because the way that plant life is managed in a forest garden environment is drastically different from your traditional means of agriculture. So traditionally, you would grow one or two types of crops for a couple months out of the year. Maybe you have peanuts, maybe you have corn or maize, and you harvest it. And your field then has absolutely no biomass on it for the remainder of the year because there's just no rain, there's no reason to grow anything. In the forest garden approach, we plant trees, a lot of them, in the forest garden system. We create garden systems, farming systems, where you are able to use water to grow crops year round, whether that's installing a tap or using double deck permaculture beds to hold water that you bring more effectively, so it makes sense to irrigate. And therefore, you don't need to cut everything every year or once a year, multiple times a year, and leave your soil barren and exposed to the sun and the wind and all of the different forces of nature that strip the fortitude of the soil and its nutrients. So what we can see from these lovely pictures and from the previous comparison shots of year-to-year drone imagery, it's completely incomparable to traditional means of agriculture, in that the amount of above ground biomass is thousands and thousands of percent greater than a traditional agricultural system. And the result is what Jean was talking about, these microclimates, these microenvironments, where you just walk into the middle of a forest garden and you can feel the moisture. You can feel it's like a completely different place than you were maybe 20 feet back.
Yeah. I always think about it was when I first joined the team, and you were giving me a quote for something, and you were talking about how you just heard all the birds, and you stepped into the forest garden and the sounds changed, as well as everything else you just mentioned. So, and I want to keep us in time, so I'm going to try to get us to the solution here in a minute. But Jean, can you tell us a little bit about pollution from fertilizers? If I have this question for Carol, but I'm sure you can speak to it as well. But looking at some of these other statistics of agriculture and our impact on the planet, not only through the way we use the land, but how we treat it with chemicals and things, chemical fertilizers and pesticides. Our IPCC report that we're referencing today also acknowledges that agriculture is the largest human-caused source of nitrous oxide emissions. And so when we talk about land degrading and farmers needing to get nutrients from the soil to grow the food that they need to survive, when the nutrients disappear from the soil, something that we lean on are chemical fertilizers. But again, that's a cyclical effect of harming the land and harming the equilibrium of the land. John, can you expand on that a little bit more for us, and what struggles farmers, the coffee farmers in Cameroon, for instance, what they face with degraded land and why they have to turn to chemical fertilizers?
Yeah, I'm going to just start with the experience that we have been, facing in the western region in Cameroon, because the more degraded land in Cameroon are in the western region. Why? Because the western region is the region that supply food in the whole Central Africa region, like in Gabon, Congo, Guinea, and Central Africa, Chad. Just the Western Africa, the western region of Cameroon, it's a fast growing. So basically, they use massive of tons of chemical yearly. And then when they did that, initially it was to grow more food for market. But the food that was grown as perishable food, most of the time it just turned very, very bad in a very short period of time. It rotten a very short period of time because they are fragile just because of those chemicals. That is the the perspective in terms of food. But now on the soil, when you use the chemical 1, 2, 3, 4 years, the soil changes the structure totally. And then when you don't use the chemical, you have nothing. And then in 10 years, when you bring the chemical, you have no yield because you burn the soil completely with the chemical. So now people started very quickly to realize that it was a damage. They are damaging their own soil. They started to mix the fertilizer with the chicken manure, with the chicken feeds. Uh, how, the chicken poo, the manure.
Yep, manure, poo.
Yes. Yeah, they
What?
started to mix up like 50-50 to have some more yield. But lately they realized that the by developing their own um, compost, their own compost, and not just fertilizing a piece of soil through our training, they realize that it is more sustainable by using the compost instead of using all those chemicals. So now the farmers are shifting. They have been shifting to to more demand, high demand on the manure compared to demand on the fertilizers. So that is the experience that they have been doing in the Western Cape, but extending in the whole region. But people still using the chemical just because there is lack of communication, lack of information sharing, lack of sharing experiences. But through forest garden pipe, we are able to reach out to community through local radio, telling them now that sustainability is the key. If they love their children of the grandchildren of their grandchildren, they have to use their land so that the next generation will be able to use the same land. And then the sustainability is not just about avoiding chemicals. So people
Mhm.
started to understand. And then people started to experience to say, hey, I grow this tomato with no chemical, but I grow this one with chemical. And bring the two tomato inside the kitchen. And after 3 days, the one that they use the chemical started, going down, when the one that they use without chemical is still strong. And then that's how the people are adapting, progressively shifting, from just agriculture with high use of chemical to the use of manure. Those are the things that we are teaching. It is a challenge, but we are teaching because sometimes it's like difficult for farmers to choose because they need also high yield. But when they need high yield and then there is no a structure or institution that take care of land management, sustainable land management, they're still struggling. So it's a way forward. We have to work progressively to encourage people to step away from the chemical, and then because
Mhm.
not only the chemical it pollute the environment, but also the chemical is polluting the little source of water that people are still using in the village, which means that they're
Mhm.
having more diseases because all the water is polluted with the chemicals. Those are the
Mhm.
challenges, and it is so hard to teach people that okay, these are the consequences of what you guys are facing. You guys are destroying your own environment and destroying your own health.
Yeah, and
Those
that's
are the
on
things.
and that's on when you talk about the farmers that we work with through Trees for the Future and through FAGRIB and the farmers that we work with together. mean, we're talking about small scale farmers for the most part, right? And so the use of chemicals, the level of degradation that's happening on a small scale, we can extrapolate that out and apply it to these industrial farms as well. And Jean, you touched on a couple of points I wanted to get to, but we are, I do want to keep us moving forward. But Jean mentioned, food waste, transportation, water pollution. So all of these things that happen in the food system are applying to the challenges that we're seeing on our planet with climate change and with pollution. And so with that being said, let's discuss finally, let's look at some positives, although we've been sprinkling them in throughout, but let's look at the solutions. And to do that, we can look at what science is telling us and what experts are saying, that the deliberate removal of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere could reverse some aspects of climate change relatively quickly if removal is large on emissions. And that's where we hear that net zero emissions phrase so frequently nowadays. It brings us now, net zero emissions brings us to our favorite topic here at Trees, being sustainable land use and forest gardens. And so as we've talked through in this live stream, but also, on our other live streams, and if you're a fan and supporter of the future, you understand generally our work. Oh, and Carol, your timing couldn't be better. We are going to really, really define the forest garden approach and regenerative agriculture. And so I introduced you while you were away, and we've had a great chat about, the different causes of climate change as it pertains to agriculture. And now we're looking at the solutions. So Carol, could you tell us really what the forest garden approach is, what it does, and what it looks like on a farmer's property?
Well, thank you, Lindsay. Forest garden approach. Here, we usually mobilize farmers first. The program goes for 4 years. We mobilize farmers. After mobilization, we take through the farmers through 3 stages. That is protection, diversification, and optimization. And then after optimization, they're able to graduate. Yes. And then after
sorry, I think we have a little delay, but what's in a forest garden? What makes it up? What trees and crops are in a typical forest garden?
Well, they are fodder trees. Fodder trees are the trees that are eaten by the animals, and they're actually nitrogenous. They help to add nitrogen in the soils. They are also fruit trees. Bananas, oranges, avocados, yes, and they're actual timber trees. Timber trees like moringa, that is the Cordia africana. There is the Brevenia. Yes. What else?
And so when we think about a forest garden, it's typically 2,500 to 4,000 trees on a half acre of land. Before you joined us, John and Andrew were talking about the microclimate of a forest garden. How do you see farmers' land change as the forest garden grows?
Pardon.
How do you see the land change as a forest garden matures?
Well, we are able to see food security. Farmers are able to produce more. They are able to sell. They are also able to get rid of using chemicals, the synthetic fertilizers, and they are able to use compost manure. Yeah.
Fantastic. And when we talk about forest gardens in Trees for the Future's typical program with staff like Carol, it's really involving all of these different agriculture, agroforestry, and sustainable agriculture techniques. But then when we work with partners like FAGRIB and John's staff, sometimes we apply the forest garden approach and agroforestry techniques to farmers that aren't going to establish a formal forest garden, but they apply those agroforestry techniques to their existing crops. So Jean, can you tell us a little bit about how that works for farmers in Cameroon, where we're working with cocoa farmers, and what tactics they can apply to their existing cocoa farms to improve their productivity and their impact on the environment?
Yeah, what have been taken away is the farmers started to realize that the trees that we're planting, they are able to harvest, to prune the trees and incorporate in the soil. And then by doing that, they saw their yield changing immediately. They said that it's like the yield was multiplied by 1.8 at the first year, and then which was incredible. That's the first thing. Second thing, the trees that we planted allowed the farm to be safe, because we have a lot of conflict between those who are having animals like cattle, and those who have farms, because all the time the cattle attack the farm. So we have to, now the impact is just like we reduce significantly, the conflict that people have been killed just because the cattle get inside the farm that they invested more and expecting to harvest something, and then they are at the court all the time. But now it's significantly reduced. But also by planting the trees, we realize that the benefit as fruit trees is very, very huge, because not only some of those fruit trees produce food for human, but produce food for animal as well. And then they started also, like avocado, to sell even the seeds, because not only they sell avocado, but sometimes they sell also seeds, to be able to multiply, to plant more trees, and selling branches for high quality avocado for grafting. So there are multiple, things that allow them to adapt on the forest garden. But now the model of developing the mulching, and also developing the compost is very, very attractive. So many people are adapting on that, because when they have the biomass, sometimes they burn, but we forbid. It is now zero burning. They are not burning and slash zero. Now we encourage them to, when they clear the farm, they gather all the biomass in the angle and mix up with some of the manure or animals drops, so that with time, with the rain, and if it's a dry season, they have to put more water. We have a technique that we allow it to do, and then now it's the competition that everyone have to harvest more compost before the raining season fell, so that they can use in their farm and have more yield. So by doing that, we started to, because it's like experimentation, to show on our farm, some of our farm, like a farm school, the farm that we bring the farmer and teach them how they can see the difference between their practice and the new practice for forest garden. So we are taking that from one region to another, so that people learn and make a difference, visibility, and then the women are there just tell that, okay, last year this is what I got, and this year this is what I got, and then this is the farm that we use our common practice, this is the farm that we didn't use, these are the difference. So it is more work, but the thing is, it is just bringing incredible impact on the community. So the adaptation on the farming garden, we have other institutions that they are trying to learn more about what we're doing, possibly maybe with time joining our effort of making more impact on the ground. So those are basically what people are adapting.
John, you said having people come to sites and learn, and that's really what it's all about for us here at Trees for the Future, is education and training farmers. I think we have a picture of you, Carol, at a training demonstration event at Waterview. Can you tell us a little bit about working with farmers, and maybe what big lessons farmers walk away with after a training event like this?
Yeah, actually, after training event, what they do is they take away is, most of the time they ask about the seed, because they have also a challenge of having good seed to have good yield. They say that, okay, I apply your technique, but I didn't have the same result. So by coming, it allowed them to have more skills and more information, not only the information to grow, but the information also to sell. So basically,
I'm glad you said that, John, because we have a really good story that I want to drop in the comments about a farmer in our program who made a second business for herself through seed sales, because she learned how to harvest her seeds and them and sell them in her community for a second stream of income. And then, John, thank you for that answer. I did want to hear from Carol on that as well. Carol, as far as the training sessions, the demonstration events that we have at Trees for the Future, what's something that you see farmers outside of seeds and that element of education? What do you see farmers taking away?
Well, I am able to.
Oh, I think we had a little feedback, but I think we're good. You go ahead.
Well, I am able to see farmers are able to do more. Actually, they make more compost, and they actually tell their neighbors who ain't in the forest garden program to try them. So you find the farmers initiated in the program are actually training farmers who are outside the program, which is very encouraging. We actually see farmers selling compost, selling things from their garden, which is very encouraging. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, I know. I love hearing your stories from trainings and what farmers learn and are excited to learn about and understand their land and what they can do with it better and really become the solution to climate change. I know we want to wrap up here in the next little bit, but I have a few more things to touch on. We are talking about how agriculture is both the problem and the solution, and something at Trees for the Future and with our partners, with Jean and Fagrib and other partners, feel so strongly about is doing it right. Making sure that our solutions to climate change are long-term solutions that involve the farmer, that involve the community, that help the farmer mitigate challenges of climate change, while at the same time, putting a long-term solution in place. But Carol, can you tell us about the people that we involve? What participation do you see from women and young people to ensure that they're part of the solution?
Well, it's encouraging to see the young people and women in the program because, well, back in the community, we see the young people, they're like, we don't want the dirty jobs, we don't want the dirty jobs. But actually, they come in and do the role so well. They plant trees and they're there to motivate us. They're like, yeah, let's do this, Sha, let's do this. How is this done? And even when you do the follow-ups, actually you are going to find them doing better than even those ones who are better. The people, like, if you go back to the Equino 1 and Equino 2, for example, you could see the farmers are a bit reluctant, but Equino 4, Equino 5, they're actually taking their role so well and doing much better. Planting trees, actually they incorporate their kids and they ask them, come, let's do this as a family, and it's actually very encouraging. Yeah. Totally encouraging. Yeah,
getting to learn and carry on family businesses, but also having the food income security to enable the children to pursue their education. So it's really so much opportunity that comes out of this one solution that's really so exciting. Jean, can you tell us a little bit from your experience throughout your career and your own upbringing, what importance should be placed on land ownership and farmers being able to operate their own land and maintain smallholder farms across the continent to make sure that we're all, especially as it relates to the Great Green Wall, able to maintain and manage these pieces of land in a sustainable way?
Yeah, the land tenure system is still the challenge because we talked about this, through the Great Green Wall, during our, it was a climate international day when we were in Senegal. We talked about John Lewis raised that issue of land tenure system. But the land tenure system moved from one country to another is not the same. There are some countries that are very advanced, like in Cameroon, we have ownership of the land. You can plant trees when you have your own land. You can plant trees inside your land, no problem. But in Chad, people started to adapt. That is, even when you're lending the farm and then you want to plant the trees, You just want to see your landlord say, hey, please, I want to plant this tree because I'm not getting more yield in this farm. Can you allow me to plant the tree? Sometimes we jump in the conversation and negotiate and allow the landlord to allow them to plant more trees in their farm. So basically, the land tenure system is the key, because even in the Sahel, most of country, the far Sahel, the women doesn't have right to the farm. But that's why we're fighting at the level of the policy and the national policy at the African Union level, so that they will be able to, to make sure that to just approve that, the women can acquire the land, the women can own the land and operate inside that land, because women are the key actors in the Sahel. And then when they don't have that full capacity of expressing, their capability on their land, on their own land, it's so critical, because most of the time when they want to do something, the owner or the husband will say, no, I don't want you to do this, because they think that they are the one to plant trees and so on. So basically, those are the things that we are working on it. It is something like politically, but we have to address, and then we just negotiating from the bottom of approach, just trying to let landowners allow to plant more trees, and not only for their own benefit in the long run, but also for the immediate benefit for the farm, for the person that is exploiting the farm. So what I wanted also to add something is, as you just mentioned earlier, that the human being is the one causing the effect of climate degradation or land degradation. That is true. That's why in Cameroon, for example, we started to do cocoa without deforestation, palm oil without deforestation, and coffee without deforestation. Not just to make it sustainable cocoa, sustainable palm oil, and sustainable coffee. Now, basically, the farm that initially they cut a lot of trees, now we are bringing more trees inside those farms to make it more sustainable. And then they understood that sometimes they have even to cut some of the trees, the existing trees, to introduce the new trees that will make the farm not more sustainable. And then there are some diseases that are affecting cocoa heavily in Ivory Coast and Ghana. When we explain to them, they say, hey, you need to avoid, you need to start working so that it cannot come to Cameroon. So people are now, they are now conscious that the agriculture is the thing that is destroying the environment, but now they need to do it wisely. That's why the climate smart agriculture is our model right now that we operating in many countries, that not only forest garden countries, but outside, like in GRC, they have they have 6 provinces that they are implementing climate smart agriculture. In Haiti, they implement climate smart agriculture in Nigeria. So we're extending and bringing out also into the forest garden approach, so that people realize, are conscious that they are the source of destroying their own environment, and then they need to think and they need to do it differently.
Yeah, and you cut out a little bit at the end there, Jean, but I think we heard the power of the point being that as humans are causing the challenges, when we look at it and think about how we can do better, farmers are able to improve their land with these really intentional climate smart practices that aren't just good for the planet, but they're good for the farming family, they're good for the community, they're good for our health, they're good for our economies. So all of these things coming together really have this profound impact on people and the planet. And I think that I want to thank all of you for joining us, and I definitely want to give each of you a chance to add anything else, if there was anything that you wanted to share before we wrap up.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll jump in here. The forest garden approach plants thousands of trees on every acre, and it really is, as Jean and Carol touched on, a really great practical solution for farmers to increase their yield and restore degraded lands. But it's also, globally thinking, an excellent way to sequester carbon and CO2 from the atmosphere. Every single acre of forest garden sequesters 144 metric tons of CO2, or what is that, 66, 64 metric tons of carbon, somewhere in there. It's a massive amount. Since 2014, our systems are set up to sequester 4.6 million metric tons of CO2 over a 20-year period, and we're growing every year. So this is really a fantastic program that Trees of the Future is heading up, and so happy to be a part of it.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for catching that. We missed that number, so I'm glad you brought it back and made sure to get it in there before we finished up. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and thank you to all of our audience members for watching today. This work, as we've said, is so important to people and the planet and the climate crisis that we all face and that we are all impacted by. But all of these amazing impacts that we're having, farmer education with team members like Carol, partnerships with partners like Jean and Fagrib, and helping cash crop farmers in Cameroon and farmers on the Great Green Wall in Chad, storing all of this carbon and sequestering it, as Andrew has found through his research. All of this is made possible through donor support, and that means through like you, through individuals and through businesses. We can't do it without you, and so we are so thankful and grateful for your support. And in honor of Climate Week and in our fight against climate change, please consider making a donation today. You can become a monthly donor and join our Sustainer Circle. Join at any number that works for you, $5, $20, whatever makes sense for a monthly gift, or just a one-time gift today in honor of Climate Week is also very impactful and goes a long way. So thank you all for joining us today, and thank you to our participants. We'll see all of you back in October. We have a big annual impact report coming out, and so we'll do a dedicated live stream to that with some members of our staff again. So we'll see you all then, and thank you, Andrew, Jean, and Carol for joining us. It was really fun.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone.